finding purpose, building impact, and being present for what matters. David Esposito was packing a bag for night class when his then 3-year-old daughter, in the middle of her story, started crying. Big tears, dead silence. And in that moment, David realized that she knew her daddy had more important things to do than to listen to his baby girl. This is a West Point graduate who has done all the right things.
The science is hard. Building the business is hard. Raising capital is hard. In our world, the product or the technology moves forward to help more people. That's a great thing. And I think just like everything else, you look for the next hill to climb. Purposeful things. These are not kind of building a widget to build a widget and sell. It's like, wait, this was cancer diagnostics. That's like important stuff. It's just nothing more inspiring to be around a group of people working towards a common goal. It's really not about me. It's about you and your story, or them and their story, to really understand where they are in that journey. I still feel like there's a lot within the healthcare field that I have problems to be solved. I'm hoping 10 years from now, I've gotten a little wiser in how to solve some of those problems. Just talking about her day, and all of a sudden I realize she's not talking anymore. And I look up, big tears come down, dead silent. I realized at that moment, I wasn't present.
A combat platoon leader during the Gulf War, a CEO who's built multiple biotech companies, and a man fighting to save millions of people from blindness. Dave's about to walk you through his combat-tested framework for finding purpose, building impact, and being present for what matters. The full conversation starts now, so don't miss it. What are you doing now, and why does it matter?
So right now I lead a small biotech company, ONL Therapeutics. We're focused on eye disease, some of the big things around glaucoma, age-related macular degeneration. So small biotech based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. You know, why that work really matters, you find out, well, we had a journey together in the pharmaceutical business for sure. I was an old Timolol rep in early days in ophthalmology. I think the reality is we're trying to protect people's sight. And you realize one of the greatest fears people have is to be healthy through their journey of life, but losing their eyesight. And we're going after diseases that don't have ready cures. And so people are on this slow, steady path to blindness. And that's purposeful work to get after that. So the small team, we get up every day and get after it. So that's what I'm doing now. And we've raised a couple rounds of financing. We're in phase 2 clinical trials, really where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, defining real efficacy and safety of a drug. And we're just putting a shoulder to it and hoping for the best.
I want to talk about that journey, how you got here, right? And take it back to, you know, even your choice to go into the military. And then talk to me a little bit about your why.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So first off, I'm a Jersey kid growing up, so not far from West Point, and was an athlete during school. And so they used to run some pretty aggressive summer camps over the years. And so as a high school kid, my first exposure to West Point in the military was going to a track camp up there. It was pole vaulter. That gave me the first view of the world of kind of what's this about and serving the military. I didn't grow up in a military family in terms of career military folks, but uncle in World War II and those kind of things. And so that was initially my understanding of the military. But what really grew is that just like find out playing athletics as a kid too, that kind of unifying a team and a calling is pretty inspiring. And so those experiences early on in summer camp and realizing, boy, there's a real calling to serve. And, you know, quite frankly, the blessings of being an American kid and growing up with opportunities like that has just been great. And so that gave me the first bug to really say, boy, maybe there is something to serving a cause bigger than your own journey. And that was planted that way. And so I ended up, I wasn't that great of a pole vaulter, but West Point was looking at the time for a couple pole vaulters that helped me get in 4 years at the academy, then a number of years on active duty with the 101st Airborne Division. I had a chance to go over the first Gulf War as a platoon leader. Those are very foundational experiences for me, and really, I think, had the underpinnings of just real character defining moments for me as what ended up being a young 22-year-old kid leading an infantry platoon in combat was real foundational for me. And that kind of started off my career in a lot of those fronts.
All right, let me ask you about that, because I remember growing up same period of time in Jersey as well. And I think the Army had a commercial that said they used to speak to the fact that it was a great place to start.
Yeah, be all you can be.
Be all you can be,
yeah.
And I bought it all,
Yeah,
right? Because I believed in it. And so it has been foundational for me, as I know it has been for you. As a leading troops in a combat, is there a defining experience you had that's stayed with you and that you can point to, that's created that foundation for Dave who's in front of me right now?
No, it's a good question. I think there are probably a multitude of those experiences, Bill. But no, I do think, one of the things I really learned over there is the importance of a direction you're taking, a team or people. That unifying mission that you have in the military, and certainly my experience in combat for that, is what are you really trying to do? What's that commander's intent on an operating plan, basically, was important to understand. You need a plan. But then ultimately, when you get to begin to execute that plan, you have to interpret data points on the battlefield or engagement on a battlefield to where maybe there needs to be adjustments in that plan. And how do you gain quick decisions to make those adjustments and keep moving forward ultimately to that mission? And when I think back on my life's journey, that experience to really understand the importance of direction, whether it's for yourself or the team you're leading, but then also to know that things change pretty rapidly and you got to be able to adjust and adapt and keep going. That was an experience for me in combat that really was foundational to me. And then when I translate that into business or being a parent or whatever, that just, you know what, you have a plan, but at some point that plan comes awry with a couple data points, and how do you adjust, keep heading in the right direction? All those things I think were, when I really look back, probably real foundational in terms of how you really live a life.
Yeah. Listening to you, I remember that old Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a strategy until you get punched in the face, right?
You probably articulated that very well, but that's exactly the truth, But you do have to. You can't just. You have to intentionally build a plan. Whether in the military, it's somewhat clear. Hey, we're going after this objective, and so. But it's still that way in life, or being a boxer. Like, hey, I've got a game plan. But you have to be able to roll with the punches or interpret new data points to figure out how you keep heading in an effective direction.
Combat, you're in the military, developing this foundation, something starts to happen where you now desire to move on from the military to corporate America. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit. What triggered that transition?
I was, like a lot of things in life, where you get some influence and guidance or so. But I experienced a lot as a young lieutenant. Graduated in 90 and soon after went over to the first Gulf War. There's a lot of experiences in those first few years that I felt like, wow, that was a foundational set of experiences. Maybe there's something else perhaps out there. I wasn't from a career military family, and a lot of input and influence over time. Say, hey, maybe it is time to transition. And I always felt that desire to serve. And so I stayed in the reserves for a little bit, but just felt like maybe it's time to put on a suit and get into the corporate world, translate some of those experiences into business building. So with a lot of thought, guidance, and direction, ended up saying, boy, it's time to get off of active duty and get a career. And at the time, the pharmaceutical industry was growing quite a bit. And I was a civil engineer by education, not a good engineer. That's why I was Army infantry, not Corps of Engineers. But ultimately, I had some foundational skills like that. Got a nice job with Merck as a sales rep. It was kind of interesting. It's always very competitive to get in jobs like that. Right. I was just like, I'll go anywhere. I'm just coming back from being in the Gulf War. I'll go wherever you got an opportunity. Sure enough, started my career as a sales rep in Louisiana and spent a good part of that journey with Merck for about 15 years or so.
So 15 years from, you started as a rep,
right?
But then you're in the marketing. What were sort of some of the key stepping stones?
Sure. It was a pretty traditional path of starting out in a customer role like sales rep, then ultimately that back to headquarters, learn a little bit of marketing, run a brand team, and go back out to the field, lead a bigger team, and back into headquarters. Did that for 15 years, about every 2 years or so. And, learned a whole lot. It was great experience. I think I came after 15, 16 years of heading up a strategy, a new commercial model where Big Pharma was trying to figure out what's the new direction, I really took a pause. I periodically took pauses in those different jobs to say, boy, is this really the right place? Am I learning and growing? And I just felt at that time, maybe there are some other areas of growth that I can have. It was the time Big Pharma was realizing that model is probably not sustainable. And I thought maybe it's time for me to broaden some skills and experience. So that, similar to my decision to leave the military, was a big one. You know, you're 15, 16 years with a large company. There's a lot of inertia behind just staying and building. But when I look back on some of these decisions I made, I feel like my North Star was about learning and growth and where I can make an impact. And I just felt like my ability to make an impact was probably waning, and maybe there's some other areas to learn and grow. And so I ended up moving into a more early mid-stage company. It was with all
before we go there, when we look at the military, right? We just talked about great place to start, how foundationally it sets you up just to be that much better as you move. When you look back, what's the one or two things that you took away from Merck that you, even if you didn't realize when you were going through it, that you pulled it to make this leap that we're about to talk about?
Yeah, I think, well, part of it is I think the one aspect would be there is a need to build a very disciplined plan to execute, you know, very similar to the Army with Merck, big organization. You got to make a plan. You got to really figure out how to rally a lot of resources, whether it's people or dollars, to deliver on objectives. So those were real foundational takeaways for me on how to think strategically about a business, how to put big blocks in place to execute that. I think was an important learning. I think the second one I'd say is it is about having great people around. I mean, Merck, like many of these great companies you hear about, chock full of really brilliant people, caring people, committed people. I think it was an important learning for me about building businesses. You really want to surround yourself with really good people. And I'd say the third thing was somewhat similar to that military experience. Having a common purpose and mission that you're heading towards, and some purposeful work was really great. That George Merck quote about medicine's not for the profits, for the people. And if we remember that, you know, the profits always follow. That kind of calling to do good. Those were probably three of my real takeaways around. You got to be disciplined about building a business, whether it's big or small. You really want to have good people around you to do that. And then it all really, at the end of the day, says, where are you heading, and some purpose.
So now you also just touched on the fact that this itch starts similar to the military. You transition here. Now, at Merck, you're well respected. I mean, you have to have folks telling you that you've got a bright future here. But there's something saying it's time to move on. The model's not sustainable, but there is a degree of safety. What emotion are you going through? And then I'd love to hear, what does that conversation with your wife sound like?
How long do we have that? No, I think that's, it hits on a couple things, So no, I was like, we were kind of tracking on all the same things, So you're in the right boxes on a talent management grid. People are saying, boy, these are probably the next few steps. And it was very comforting, but reassuring that, boy, maybe even in the consolidation of the industry, there's probably a path forward. And was very true, And I think that was a little bit of the, call it healthy tension or so, or discussions at home. You're potentially going into no man's land where you have a nice path forward. I think it did come down where in my heart of hearts want to really be useful. And I felt that I'm being useful to perhaps make the machine move a little bit more efficiently. But I just seem to want to be more on the building side, the innovative side, where I felt there was much greater opportunity to learn and grow. So that, in my professional mindset. Now, in the home mindset was really tough. We have 4 kids at the time. Our oldest kids were in that middle school, about high school age. Boy, we had moved quite a bit, probably in that journey around the country for 15, 16 years, where it's like, well, what are we really thinking about? And I'll give Tracy, my wife, all the credit through a lot of these moves, because it wasn't just leaving Merck. It was like every 2 years saying, boy, there's probably a good opportunity here. Let's go to Seattle. We were in Omaha, Nebraska, kind of like, whoa, how long is this going to last? But I do think, a credit to her to say, hey, in terms of building a family and a career, you got to make some give and takes. And sometimes that's the way it worked out.
I'd say what hits home about what you just described, right? Military or at a Merck, because your family, they are packing up, leaving friends, going places. And the base premise or plan everybody's going off of is by doing this, it's a stepping stone to something better at Merck, at the company you're with. Even if it's not said, that's the feeling. And so when you say, oh, yeah, well, even for the best of reasons, I'm moving somewhere else, there is this part of it that's like, what was all that? For kicks? Giggles? And so now you have this unknown that needs to quickly rise up to say, no. It was for this, right? Yeah. So now you make the transition.
We could go into a few on that one, but I think, to put a little bit more gas on that fire, the timeline of that was, not only was a big change and all that, but this was spring of 2009. This was the worst of the financial crisis. March of 2009 was the lowest point of the S&P 500 in our growing up years. People thought the world was falling apart. So it was at that time too. And by the way, we moved from Seattle back to Pennsylvania a few years before that. Figured this is the last move. Right. Let's stretch by the bigger house to settle in. Kids will grow up. So all of that pressure was piled on, and
this is the perfect time for me to leave.
So we had a lot of really tough. We really did, but I think it came back and forth of just again a real supportive kudos to her. So I can see it in your heart that this is probably the right thing for you to do, and for us as a family to gain another experience. And I think, looking back now, you can say it was defining for us as a family, but also, core to the foundation of keeping us together through those times. Yeah, no, we could probably talk for a while about the intensity of that, but at the end of the day, it was at times you got to just support each other and roll with it and see how it goes.
Let's blast into the startup world, right? Where do you start and how does it go?
Well, I think, part of that too was, sounds a little bit more dramatic than it was, but it was for sure. This was moving from a big pharma group into what was a diagnostics business. At the time, it was the emergence of specialty diagnostics, where you could, the typical diagnostic model is you have a test, you hopefully can sell a box to Quest or LabCorp, and it's a commoditized market. But the emergence of specialty diagnostics was where really high margin diagnostics that you need almost a growth mindset, like what pharma taught us over the years, applied to diagnostics. So from that standpoint, it was really a commercial growth story, of which I had experienced a lot of at Merck. So I was able to apply a lot of that going forward. And it was in the stage of business, it was a private equity funded business. So I didn't have to raise capital at the time, which would have been another dimension of change that I hadn't had experience with, So that first experience was really leveraging some of what I learned at Merck on how to build a team, scale up a commercial effort, and do that. And it was an allergy diagnostics business. And the PE model, at least at that time and of that industry, was scale it up as fast as you can and then eventually look for a strategic buyer. And fortunate, the team did great. The business grew. We ended up selling it to a large diagnostics player, healthcare services company, Thermo Fisher, at the time. So that, in and of itself, I'd say, looking back, it kind of worked out on those fronts, in terms of scaling up a business, getting an edge that way. It gave me really a chance to say, all right, this is kind of where innovation happens in this earlier mid stage, and kind of get excited about leading a team and building businesses that way. And then that really led me over the course of a couple companies of, hey, I like to get earlier and earlier to where it's two folks like you and me sitting around the table with an idea. How do you build that up? All of it focused on healthcare and innovation, whether it's diagnostics or now therapeutics. So that excitement around an idea, how do you build a business and a team and raise capital, which was subsequently the experiences I gained in other opportunities that really gave me a sense of, even though it's a bit rough and tumble, I kind of like that, being on that forward edge of innovation.
Two things I picked up so far, right? You come out of West Point, you go straight to war. You get thrown right in, right? So things work out, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of that timing on there. Now you leave big pharma, you go straight in, and it is successful. It kind of goes the way it's supposed to go.
Right.
The way this story ends is all the other ventures you touch, they just take off because you've learned how to make no?
That was the case, yeah. I kind of accelerated to present. I know, so in a few other companies. So I've had a few good exits, or so to speak, or to your point, go as planned. I've taken 2 companies into bankruptcy or controlled wind down, whatever polite way you want to describe it, where, you know, you have a product that may look great, act great, but you're positioned it wrong in the marketplace. And eventually investors run out of gas supporting that. And you have a leadership team perhaps that's not willing to change gears and realize this segment is not where we should be here. Careened it into bankruptcy. People, myself included, lost everything, lawsuits, all of that chaos that you can think of. And then the other experience, somewhat similar, great product, poor positioning, a little bit of timing on investment, and core investor walked away from the table in the last minute, and you wind the business down. I would say similar to even my experiences in combat and other, the plan, you make the plan, sometimes data points come out that you got to work on. So I think my learning over this now 15, 16 years of being in more in the early mid stage, most don't work out according to plan, but you learn through it and you hope you move the science forward. But there's been 2, and, you know, on the cusp of what is potentially a third painful one there that I'm a part of, that the science is hard, building the business is hard, raising capital is hard, and sometimes it just doesn't come together and it hurts, but you hopefully kind of learn, move some things forward.
So the highs, the ones that work, what's that feeling like?
No, it's those kind of life-defining changes that you hear about or read about. You know, you put all your effort into it, team does great, you get what would be a good exit. In our world, the product or the technology moves forward to help more people. That's a great thing. But also from the practical side, you need capital to do this. So investors are rewarded, the team is rewarded with that kind of upside, which is a really great thing to do. It feels great in that the team you're working with is recognized and rewarded with a product that continues and a capital reward that feels really good. So those are really great sense of accomplishment in that. And I think just like everything else, you look for the next hill to climb, or it becomes like, again, back to where we started, very purposeful things. These are not kind of building a widget to build a widget and sell. It's like, boy, wait, this was cancer diagnostics. That's like important stuff. And now I'm in eyesight. So it does go back to that purposeful work.
Which was always the cherry on top for being in this, you know, life science world, that business and all the strategies, tactics, you know, sales, marketing. It's all a part of it. So you get that part of it. But at the end of the day, when you get done, you go home, you're like, I'm doing good work. I'm doing good. That feeling, that high. But then you mentioned the failures. When those failures inevitably come, where do you anchor to relaunch?
Oh, that's really, no, it's a great question. So I'd say too, as a side, they are painful. You know, they're painful for the people. I mean, these are small ventures. When you have 6, 7 people and you realize, boy, Allie just bought her first house and she's counting on that paycheck for a mortgage payment, all those kind of things, that hurts. Like, it hurts for you personally, it hurts for you as the team you've come to build, and also investors and people that, a lot of these are friends and family funded to get started. Then you get to more professional money or institutional investors. It hurts across the board. You got to show up at Thanksgiving with some family members that may say, hey, we want to support your plans. So I just want to say it does hurt for that. It hurts that maybe the technology or the leadership, as in a key leadership role, didn't make the right choices at times. So those are, you know, painful journeys. I think what I learned in the ball fields early on in the military taught me that. Merck to an extent too in these ventures, and also being a parent, you're going to hit the canvas many times. You got to find the strength to pick yourself up and continue. And I think for me, there's a faith component. There is a sense of, you know, certainly from some of my life experiences in the military, you can endure a lot of misery, suffering, and despair, much more so than you think you can. And when you go through it, you look back and you realize, all right, there's a little bit more gas in the tank. But what causes me to kind of get back up is there's a problem to be solved. there's purposeful work out there. I got to get through. And I think there's also that need also when you're a young guy too, you're looking into the eyes of your children, your spouse, like, wait, we got to get up here. I still got to make it happen. So there's that purpose. There's also, you do feel there's a sense of calling to try to contribute that gets you up. But in no uncertain terms, no shining over it. It's painful. It's hard. You go through those self-doubts. Like, can I really do this again? Am I really able to kind of get going? Maybe I've seen enough. I need to go back and try to get a less stressful challenge.
Right.
But I found myself just kind of back into the fray again, as I think, again, it's purposeful work. As long as I could see myself being useful, dust yourself off and kind of get back into it.
You have a unique perspective here that I'd love to hear. Leading men into battle in the combat, leading through a failed venture. Which one's harder?
Both have different degrees of difficulty. I would say, the risk of life and limb and all of that in combat situations certainly puts on a level of difficulty and dimension that I don't think you can replicate in a lot of other areas. But the sense of the challenge is certainly out there. I think what's complicated now in my adult life is you have a lot of other things going on that these failed business ventures do potentially wipe you out financially. They do potentially put a lot of stress on those you really care about that you really don't want to have that much stress applied to them. So those are really tough learnings as well. I think it's hard to throw too many comparisons to other than say they're both difficult, painful, but helped form me into who I am today, and I still would sign back up. Just kind of what it is.
We've used 2 boxing analogies already. Yeah, you got a strategy that gets punched in your face. You got to pick yourself off that canvas. I think about Ali or someone just leaning on the ropes, trying to get their wits about them during a standing 8 count because you got to go back out there. You're back out there. Tell me what drives that and what you're doing now.
Sure.
We talked about it up front, but now I want to find out a little bit more about it matters. And we're not getting younger. We're not in our 30s anymore, not in our 40s anymore. Right. Some might say we're beyond our prime. But one of the things that I see is this is our prime. When you think about all the experiences you've dealt with, the good, the bad, the ugly, the highs, the lows, you never had that when you were 30 or 40. And you've taken on this new challenge, this great challenge. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. I think it does come back to where there are problems to be solved. There's in our world of growing up in human health and that there are real difficult problems to solve. And so I do get energy around that problem that's very purposeful to alleviate suffering of others. And being in healthcare, you see that every day. And I get energized by just trying to be useful and purposeful in that. And so I think that's what helps rally me back either from a high or a low to get back into the fight, that it's just, there's a lot of need out there and you can see yourself applying to solve some of those problems and meet those needs. And so that's the rallying around ONL Therapeutics and what we're doing today. I mean, as we touched on earlier, people losing vision is a very scary thing. In some of the areas of disease that we're working in have no approved therapies for that. And our founder, Dr. David Zaks, who's a brilliant internationally renowned retina specialist. I mean, his founding of the company, the essence of that was when he'd sit across the table from a patient and say, Mrs. Jones, Mr. Jones, there's nothing more I can do for you. You're on a slow path to losing your sight. And that's a tough spot.
And in layman's terms, in this case, how are they losing their sight? What's causing it?
Sure. So there's a condition called age-related macular degeneration, the dry form of that, where it's a lesion on your retina. And ultimately, your retina transduces light, submits a signal to your brain to be able to see. And that lesion eventually covers up those cells of the retina that transduce that light back to your brain for a signal. So eventually, you have a lesion that covers your retina and you can't see. So you have a slow pathway of that lesion continuing to grow until it cuts off your vision. And what David developed and what we're working on at ONL is we have a drug that blocks those cells from dying and basically halts, or what we've seen, slow the progression of that lesion. So what you can really say to a patient, or what we're studying now to say, is if you take this drug, you could slow the progression of your pathway to blindness. And for many, that might say, I can add years of my sight to see my grandkids, to still read on a day-to-day basis. So that's the real purposeful work
to be productive, like we've been talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It could change everything. How many people worldwide are we talking?
These are millions in the U.S., 4 or 5 million in the U.S. Globally, these are massive opportunities to make a real impact on people. We're also in glaucoma as well. These are millions of patients that are suffering from these diseases. And so it has a chance to make a real impact. The science is tough. It's complicated. We talked about failures earlier. The road is strewn with failures of trying. We feel like we've got as good a shot as anybody, and we're in a large global phase 2 study right now. 325 patients. And really at the end of that, we'll see, is the drug effective enough and safe enough to then move into what would be phase 3 or approval level studies.
I think it really helps me with what gets you up off of that canvas, what gets you up off of the rope, what gets you back in there, even post disappointment. It's just, even if it's a chance to make a difference in that many lives.
That's it. And knowing, to the point you made earlier, you need a good team around you. If there's anything that maybe we didn't say, or I didn't say from our journeys we've been discussing, this is no one-man band. You need a team around you, not a scientist by training. Mm-hmm. You need scientific expertise. You need courageous investors who are willing to support these, what are very high-risk investments. And you need teams that are just really willing to capture that vision and run hard, because it certainly is not easy. And so that's the other part of this, is just the excitement of being around others, similar to your and mine military experience. So there's just nothing more inspiring to be around a group of people working towards a common goal. That's huge. And that gets you to run to work.
One might even say it's essential. Who your friends are, who do you have around you in the room? I mean, there's so many analogies and sayings, right, that speak to this.
Totally.
Show me who your friends are is one. But the positive side is that you need a team around you, whether you're in the military or at Merck, or large companies or startups. You've got to get your squad around you, your advisors. Tell me a little bit about the advisors and mentors. What role have they played?
No, that's a great point. I think it is true. You can't go through this journey alone without a team around you. But I do think, in what I've come to appreciate over the years in more senior roles, is that you do need some real trusted advisors where you can really be open and transparent about everything. As a key leader in the team, I feel like I'm a transparent, open, communicating leader, but certain things, that saying, this lonely at the top, it is. And you need some people that you can really just be as real as you need to be, to make sure you can gain stability and get that going. So I think I have a few close friends, quite frankly, from my military days, that are a phone call, text away to tap into. I've also had some really good business mentors. We talked about a transition from big pharma into early stage. I stumbled through a lot of things. You know what? You realize there are some people out there who just really want to, whether it's called give back or whatever, they've experienced a lot. They're at a point in their journey in life where they see a young guy trying to hustle and make it work, and maybe they can add a little bit to it. And I think I've always been receptive to that, so it's some people who really said, hey, these are a couple of the pathways. This is how you might want to navigate it. Were really helpful to me during that journey. And I'd say to this day, help keep me grounded during those, both professional side and then also just personal close contacts, to be able to just be real in the realities of life.
And so that's vitally important. The other flip side that I would say is vitally important, and I know the role you've played for me, and I know whenever I bring your name up, they have a story about how you've helped them. Even folks I didn't realize you were connected to. I was talking to another former colleague. I told him, you're coming in, and he's like, man, that guy would give me the best advice, right? He would help me. And so that's vitally important. And I guess the question for me is always, even when you're going through it, Who are you bringing along with you?
That's a great one. And I'd say too, in terms of the theme we've been talking about, how do you keep the energy going for the next big challenge? Well, to you and I, we're not getting any younger. So it's important to, I think, cast back that experience to those who want to contribute and move things forward and be a resource to them. So I do find myself doing that over time, that if the experiences I can share can help others, and what's great about what you're doing here, and there are forums a lot, I'd say a little bit easier to do that now, where you can cast influence that way than they were when you and I were growing up in the business world. But I think that's an important part, to really be able to share that. And I think give back, or just, as I said earlier, just to be useful and contribute. And I think you can do that throughout the journey of life in a variety of things. And that's an important part, I think, to remember.
So in saying that, all the great things that, I admire you doing and admiring you through all the steps we've talked about, you also have a personal venture. Talk to us a little about what that is, because I really want to spend some time here to better understand the why.
Sure.
So talk to us about it.
That little venture's probably been a 30-year side hustle for me over time. And so Harvest Time Partners is the business, what it's called. It's really about helping you be your best for those you care about most, and at home, at work, in the community. So over that 30+ year professional and personal journey, my wife and I, she would say, oh, it was probably you, David, thinking about doing more of this than me. But Tracy's been along for the ride on this one too, that, you realize there's some of these common principles that help a family, help kids, help a marriage, that also apply in business and the community. Things like honesty, compassion, commitment, all of those things. And so we've, over time, developed a number of those resources that really speak to what we were just talking about. How can you share some experiences that may be helpful to others, whether it's children's books I've written, or leadership books, or seminars, or programs to help people be the best version of themselves. And so that's the backdrop for Harvest Time. A lot of the resources we've developed have been personally through our own journey, whether it's the professional leadership side, families, we've developed some communication resources. Father, too, you realize you don't always talk to your kids about things you should, or you don't put the issue on the table like you should. And we've developed some resources that help do that. And then the third pillar of that is really the community. It's not only about what home life is like and what work life is, but you want your kids and families to be able to grow up in a good community that's supportive, because not everybody may have, resources at home. So you want a community to be able to do that. So that's been the backdrop. I will say it's been it has been a side hustle for a number of years. I have a very busy day life, so to speak. So it's our day job. So it's quite hard to always allocate some things, but periodically in times in that journey, put a little bit more effort, time, and money towards it.
Yeah, there's in terms of communication and decisions, even when you're talking about the mentors and being able to speak to them, it's probably across the board, but now I know as men, sometimes you're making these decisions. You want to be that bold leader and go where no one's gone before, or whatever the charge is, right?
Right.
And there's also this part that you wake up in the morning, you're like, what on earth am I doing? Or I'm scared out of my wits and I can't share it because I'm going to panic everyone. To me, you can't have enough avenues or opportunities to be your truest, most authentic, most honest self, to be able to lay it out, because we're always being put in these boxes.
Right.
You're either tough or you're not. You're either this or that, versus I'm all of the above. And it changes on different days. And it's part of what makes us individually who we're supposed to be. Even if you look at some of these great characters we looked at in the Bible, right? It's not this linear, it's always perfect, the strength and all. They're doing things that you're like, what?
Yeah.
And similarly, if someone would read our story, there are times where you are Dave leading combat, leading industry. And then some mornings you wake up as Dave. Yeah. Can somebody just give me a hug? Hey?
No, that's so true. I think that's the reality of life, that I think it seems to be getting a little bit more appreciative now in our world today, but it's like we all have those journeys, whether it's biblical characters, professional characters, you and I, or even people that may be on stage looking like they got it all together. You know, we all have this cycle of life. We're on top sometimes doing all the right things, so to speak, and then we're down in the bottom, probably got there because we didn't quite act the way we probably should have, and you got to work through the repairing of that and the repentance of that. And I think that redemption story is really huge. It's carried when you really get to know people. You realize they have those kind of stories, and that to me, and that's a little bit of what comes out in the work at Harvest Time Partners too, is that we all have that need to know we matter, we contributed, and also we can be redeemed from our mistakes and our shortcomings, because I've made a whole slew of them, whether it's in the business world. We talked about a few. We didn't uncork all the personal, challenges and family, all those things.
That's for the next interview.
Exactly. We need to block about a half a day for that. But that is like real. And that's what's important to know. And that for all of us to know that there is a need to have good colleagues that can pick you up, help you up, redeem you back into the game, because we all go through those real high highs and real low lows, whether it's characters in scripture that really read those or lived that. When you get to know each other enough, people are journeying through that. And then I've found, at least in even one of the books I wrote, that Pathway to Positive Influence, that it's really important. It's really not about me. It's about you and your story, or them and their story, to really understand where they are in that journey. But most of us grew up, whether in industry, at home, where it was a little bit more authoritarian. Oh, listen to me, do this. But the reality is we're all journeying at a different pace and through different experiences. And that I've found, as you've kind of learned to get into somebody's experience, you realize you have a greater degree of understanding and want to perhaps more help than be quick to judge or rule out, those kind of things.
I think what you're talking about now is so important, right? On so many fronts. Yes, we're not getting any younger, but then we have so much to give. And then that question becomes, what's the most effective way to do it? Because no one's going back with you to 1980, whatever you want to point out, right? Or 1990s when we, started our military careers, or they probably don't even want to go back to us to 2000, 2008, 2009, where we're making these choices about, our transition. But the principles behind them are always going to be vitally important. And I know you've touched on sort of the impact of technology and social media. Folks either want to make it all bad or all good, and it is. We just talked about the need for us to have mentors and folks around us and a team around us, and also who we bring along, including our family, our kids. And the common denominator is they're all people, either people we know very well, people we don't know very well. And there's this need to meet folks where they are and to figure out how to engage them and earn the ability to help them move. Even our kids showing up and this is the way it should be and ought to be, and this is the way I did it, probably hasn't been working very well for
No, that's very true.
For us. And it just seems like a lot of what you're speaking to, or what I've heard, and I've read, a number of things that you've written or you've spoken to, and I take a lot away from it. Talk to me, in a book, the perspective there, right? In terms of that sort of setup, key message, the key takeaway in terms of our interrelationships.
I think maybe I'd say there's two that I think about across all those things. One is you touched a little bit on just the generations maybe we grew up to, and then where we are today, is that I've found in my professional journey, personal journey, and what I've kind of written a lot about is, one thing is to be present, to be dialed in where you are today. Our phones go off all the time. We got all kind of activities going on that could be distracting, but I think be present is really foundational important. And we all got to work on that. We're all struggling with that, but be present, dialed in when you're with people is important. And then the second piece is a little bit of what I touched on, that it really isn't about me and my experience and all this kind of wisdom or what. It's about you. Let me just try to dial into you and understand your journey and your experience. those two are important because we all want to shift into a gear of telling or describing of, hey, this, that, and the other. You raise kids too, like everybody will dial off, and people in the workplace. So that part about being present, but then also realizing it's about them. Let me just get super interested in trying to understand you and where you're going. And then perhaps I've seen it in my own life. At some point, there'll be a click where you can share a piece of guidance. But if you don't first start off letting them be them and understand them, you never get that. Not never, but you usually don't get that opportunity to really cast a word.
Like so much of whether it's general society, business, parenting, social, everyone wants to say, this is the box that works and this is the box you should, and it's the only box that does this. And real life is actually, we do have all these modules, but really, if you, one, it's situational. And then two, you need to pull from a lot of different places for what's needed now. And so the principles undergird that, but you need to pull. And oh, by the way, if the situation changes, we're going to pull from a number of other boxes. So not only can I not be in a box, I might not just pull from this box for where we're going. And so it's so important to figure out where they are and then to be asked and trusted. To then say, and it's funny when that happens, how much people, I read this thing once, nobody wants to be sold or told what to do. Everybody loves being led by someone who they trust in and believe that you are leading in a way that truly is based on what you think or know of me. Great. Right? And I'll follow. Because I trust it.
No, that's totally great. And sometimes I think at least I've learned that you just sit comfortably together. You can kind of learn and grow. You don't have to say a whole lot. Just that simple act of just being present and listening goes a whole lot, further these days than perhaps.
Sometimes they just want you to cry with them.
Yeah. There you go.
That's what's from you, right? No speeches, no direction. Me a hug right now, and cry, and even with the kids, you say the same thing you said when they were 3.
Right.
I don't have anything to back that up.
That's right. No.
And that's all that's needed.
Awesome.
All right. So we've got to hop into my car. Brought this DeLorean. I don't know if you're familiar with them. I got one, right? And so we're going to hop in. Okay. We're going to go 10 years into the future. No doc.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. It's amazing how we'll get there, but I'm with you. I'll go with you.
I know it click after a while. 10 years from now.
Well, the reality is I hope we're still kind of plugging along. No, that's good. I think, I really do. Well, one is the way I said before, like I may have a plan, but I may have to adjust some based on some data points. But I do think I hope
if you had a vision, if you visualized it. Where would you?
I hope I'm being useful. I really hope I'm being useful. I see.
In what ways, though?
Well, I think,
what do you?
I still feel like there's a lot within the healthcare field that I have problems to be solved. I'm hoping 10 years from now, I've gotten a little wiser in how to solve some of those problems and build teams. And I still feel a calling towards doing that, but also to share, I feel with the work with Harvest Time Partners, like that never goes out of style. Never. Whether it's homework or community. So I do feel like that side hustle will always be a part of that. But I do hope I still have a shoulder to solving problems and helping teams get there. I really feel that. And a part of that will be, as our family grows too, to be a part of that journey as well. Yeah, so we'll see that, at the end of the day, you're useful. I'm useful in what.
Okay. Well, you've seen the movie. We're not staying here. So get back in the car. And now we're going to go visit 30-year-old Dave.
Boy.
See him?
Yeah.
You see what he's doing? So you've been in the present, you've been in the future.
Yeah.
You've seen, 10 years in the future, Dave. Now we've got a lot of wisdom to drop on 30-year-old Dave. A couple of things. What are you telling him?
I think a little bit of maybe what touched on before. You got to be present. If I think about workplace, we grew up with a little bit of start of email. We eventually got BlackBerries, right? And that kind of started this whole level of distraction. And if I was brutally honest with myself, there were home life moments where I probably was not present. And I could see that in the 4 kids and a foster daughter and a wife that probably would say, you probably weren't as present as much as you need to be. Sure, you got to work, do it right. You know, you're traveling. There's those times you're going to be out of pocket, but when you're in, you better dial it. You know, so I think I would tell that younger self, be present, not just at home, but also in the workplace. You know, it's like when you're with something, you got to dial in and be present. You know, that would be one really core thing. And probably the second one would be try not to worry as much. You know, I think the principles you mentioned, we've been talking about, if you stick to those principles, have faith in the process that, you know what, you're going to have a few bumps in the roads, a couple challenges, stuff may really come off the rails for a while. Yeah. But if you stay true to those principles, it kind of gets where you're trying to go, you know. And I think I probably spent a fair amount of time and a bit of just worrying that, hey, it just may not be good enough to deliver on it. Just stick to the principles, keep faith in the process, and you get those. Probably the two things. But I'd anchor back on that, underscore that first one. You got to be present. You know, time moves fast. I'm fortunate enough that I saw my kids, you know, grow into young adults now, but you never know what may happen. And it certainly could have been present for that.
Matter of fact, I almost feel like driving around the corner from your house and visiting 30-year-old Andre.
Is that right?
Because there are gaps.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is you look out for, you know, the bad things that can throw you off. And, you know, for the most part, do a pretty good job avoiding those. But it's the good things, the right things you're doing. You're getting up, you're going to work, you're staying engaged, you're making a living, you're taking care of the family. That, to your point, probably a little chat with the 30-year-old Dave and Andre. I go, because you're doing such great things and what you're doing is right, you almost have to double down and pay attention that you're not in the moment, though. I hear my wife and kids talk about experience. Remember, big stories I remember, but there's some of these little ones that you weren't as present as you thought you were. I've heard Warren Buffett speak to this as well, like things he regrets from his first marriage, being there, but you're not present. So
I think if some young parent out there is listening, or even for you and I to feel, all right, Esposito really fouled up, so maybe I'm okay.
No, sorry,
but growing up at Merck, where I was working hard and I was going at night getting my MBA. And I can remember one time we had two girls at the time, running home from work, getting up, packing my bag to go to class that night. Our oldest daughter, she was about 2.5 at the time. She would say, Daddy, I want to tell you something. What happened? And I'm like, hey, great, Stephanie, tell me what's going on. And I became not present, started packing my bag because I got to get out the door. She's talking about her day. And all of a sudden I realize she's not talking anymore. And I look up, big tears come down, dead silent. I realized at that moment, I wasn't present. She is a young 2.5, 3-year-old kid. Knew at that moment her daddy didn't care about her. Something else was more important to pack a bag to go to night class. And I still remember that. Now, and I've talked to her about it. Thank goodness she says, Daddy, I don't remember. but you and I know there's some hard wiring that happens in those experiences. 1, 2, 3 years old, that takes a lot of work to get through that when you're an adult. So I share that to say, I'm certainly not the guy that's perfect on it, but also it's back to that presence that's critically important for a young, beautiful daughter who I would give anything to be back in that moment to say, I'm all yours, forget class, I could survive without it.
Exactly.
But I didn't at that moment. You know, it's just another
So sometimes the good things you got to watch out, because to your point, that is clearly nothing close to the truth. And so just the last thing you want to communicate is not even true.
Right.
And so here we are communicating. Oh, yeah, I've got more important things than you. Packing this bag and making it to class that no one's going to reprimand me for being a little late.
I know.
Over you.
Just think about it. I know. It's like.
Absolutely. All right. So let's come back to the present. Because like you said earlier, there's someone listening right now. Similar journey probably, or similar choices, situation. What advice would you give?
You know, I think for them to realize too, it is about, they got to take a good inventory of themselves. People talk about self-awareness, emotional intelligence. I think we all need to be really intentional about trying to take a good look in the mirror, realize where we are. So I'd encourage anybody in these journeys, figure out where am I professionally, personally, but that good, healthy, quiet time, perspective in the morning, evening, whenever you get about kind of where am I and where am I really going? Where do I really, you talked about 10 years, where am I really trying to get to professionally, personally. I think those are really important things to do. We probably grew up on that 7 habits of effective, right? Begin with the end in mind. I mean, that's an important piece that in the business of life, we don't always do. And so I think that I'd encourage somebody to be really self-aware on where they are and then where do they really want to go. And then it becomes pretty methodical from there. Like, all right, that's like this plan we're talking about. All right. First plan, you got to take a first step. How does that plan come together in those aspects of life? And then the other piece would be to just be ready for either whether it's a punch or changing the battlefield.
Get you on that game.
Right. And so just know that's happening, absorb it, you'll survive, you get back up and keep going. And those would be a few things I'd share with somebody, but it does start with figuring out where they are and where do you want to go, and then just machine.
That purpose is out there. That great thing that's needed from you is out there.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, there's going to be some knocks along the way, and we've got to make sure we know and understand ourselves and be present for our loved ones, folks that need us as we journey there. And we got to have folks around us because it's not a one-man show or a woman.
Good stuff.
All right, Dave. It's been great.
Andre, wonderful having. I appreciate being on it.